Hello and welcome to Stephen University. This week we watched Rose's Scabbard. AKA the return of Crazy Aunt Pearl. I'm gonna pass it straight over to Chris as is becoming tradition. What was it about? What do you think the plot was? I should rephrase that, because what do you think the plot was suggests you might not know what the plot is, but obviously you've just watched it. You should have a perfectly clear idea. So, Chris, what was the plot?
I think the plot was me in a chicken sandwich, because I watched it at lunch, and that was ages ago now.
Right. Is that your subtle way of being like, guys, if I've forgotten some of the details, don't worry about it? It's very subtle.
So Stephen is chilling. No, it's really bad. Right, no, they're on. It starts with, this may be tough. That was my way of doing that. It starts with them all on an adventure. They're collecting weaponry. They're collecting gem weaponry, and then they find the Scabbard. I fucking know. Scabbard.
Which,
they find
by
the
the way,
sword
apparently,
package.
just for a little bit of colour, in some countries, I think Spanish, I want to say, I think the word for scabbard, because it literally means like, sheath, sort of surrounds something, could be potentially a double entendre for vagina. So in some countries, it's called like essentially like Rose's sword or whatever, because they didn't want that connotation.
That's fair.
So I read that in the trivia today and I was like, that is pretty funny.
Pearl finds the vagina and because I can't say Scabbard as established at the end of last week's. Yeah. She finds this and
you can call it a sheath if you'd like. A sheath is fair.
Okay, so she finds the sheet, the sword sheet, and Stephen takes a remarkably long time, side note, to realise what it is and that he's seen the sword. Because she holds that up and I'm like, oh, the sword's in Lion. And Stephen just doesn't get there quick. But anyway,
he doesn't.
It becomes apparent that Pearl and Rose had a very close relationship. This brings out Crazy Aunt Pearl and she's obsessed with this close relationship. And she decides Stephen says, what was my mum like? His first fucking question in 43 episodes. Evidently, he's also, as well as not asking questions, this episode makes it apparent that he's also not giving answers, because I think I'd have walked back in and if the gems were like, hey, Stephen, what do you want for dinner? I'd be like, oh, I want together breakfast. Oh, by the way, Lion, I pulled a sword out of him earlier, but evidently Stephen's not been given any of this information over.
Yeah,
so he is equally bad at
I found that
giving.
Interesting. I agree. Like, the fact that he'd never thought to pass the information on that he went with Connie. Like put it this way, that he essentially went with Connie to the armory, finds all that shit out, then sets it off chasing him and trying to blow him up, and then him and Connie draw a sword out of Lion. He literally, between him and Connie, they hid it away. All that excitement happens. Then he went home that night and was just like, hey guys, we saw a film today. Yeah. Dog copter. It was it was great.
Nuts. Equally, in the episode where he goes into Lion 3 straight to video, or Lion 2 straight to video, whichever one it was. That is what it's called. Yeah. We talked about the beauty of this being the first time he's seen his mum and how amazing that was. Yeah. And this episode, we found out that off camera, there's a giant fucking photo of the woman, just above the door.
That's always been there.
That's what I'm saying. So it's not the first time he's seen her, is it?
Well, no, but it was the first time. But we've known that photo's been there since we saw that photo in episode 1 or 2 as an audience.
Did we?
Yeah, that's always been there.
Remember that.
They've even looked at it and referenced it once or twice. But I think that what we talked about with the video was it wasn't so much that it was the first time he'd seen her, but seeing a picture of someone and seeing them in video moving and talking.
Yes,
and
that's fair. Hearing her voice. And
stuff, it's a big deal.
So anyway, so he's like, what was, for the first time he asked the question, he's like, what was mum like? So she, we should get, no, that's fair. Sorry, I was going to criticise that and be like, he's seen her on video, but yeah, no, that's fair. Grieving boy, fine. So Pearl's like, it's fine.
Grieving boy, grieving child. Fine, don't worry about it. It's fine.
That's allowed.
Okay, great.
So by that I mean like it's allowed from a writing point of view, not me just being like he's allowed to grieve.
I
Let
understand.
him.
I understand.
So she's like, let's go to this special place, and she takes him to the armory, and he's like, I've been here before, and she gets angry. Oh, actually, before that, they have an argument, and she gets quite bitchy with both Stephen and Garnet, but we'll chat about that. So they go to the armory, and Stephen's like, I've been here before, there's this and this, and she gives the technical names and blah, blah. And then he's like, oh, I know where the sword is, finally. And he pulls it out, and then he shows the other gems, and then he reveals he's storing a bike in there as well, in line as well. Which
That's
is,
a great
really
gag.
good, fun gag, gag.
Brilliant visual gag. That's the last thing I thought he would come out with on a bike. Ding, ding. That's amazing.
It's brilliant.
And the
Especially
helmet.
because like he's storing a bike. He's storing a bike in a much more efficient and powerful vehicle, essentially. But fine. And then and she strops off, and he follows her, and he's like, they have a moment, and she plays her R2D2 hologram of Rose, and they share, she relives that moment. Stephen gives her a big hug. It's very sweet. And they have a cuddle and they go home on top of Lion. That's the episode.
Yeah, and she sort of relives some of her glory days because he gets to the flag out of Lion.
Oh yeah, that leads to another great gag where he reaches
like
into Lion and pulls out a drink.
Yeah, it's great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so she sort of relives some of her glory days, I guess. You know, it's all without audio. It's just very, very beautiful music. Actually, we don't compliment the music enough on the show, I don't think. But then the music, the incidental music, we compliment the songs a lot, but we don't often compliment the incidental music. But this piece of music is fantastic. While Rose is sort of reliving those glory days, and they're on Lion together. It's very sweet and it's very well done.
I really like the episode. I think any episode with Rose in the title gets you excited. I thought this was a good exploration of Pearl and her relationship in a similar way that we got to Amethyst recently.
Yeah. I think that's fair. That's a fair comparison. That occurred to me while I was watching it. That it's just sort of like we got the what's Amethyst's sort of. What are her demons? And now let's have a look and what are Pearl's demons? Like what's going on under the surface? Because we all know that they sort of Stephen is still very young, and it's just like, again, not to continually make this reference, but this is again a very 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 relevant point in Harry Potter. A lot of the characters, we don't learn their deeper, darker sides until Harry gets older. Or finds out by accident, because they don't feel like he should know these things. They don't feel like he should know these things so young. And I feel like Stephen has always got on the surface level of these characters, and they all get on and they all love each other. Blah blah. They're a big family unit. But I think as he's getting older now, he's learning all sorts of stuff about them, and we're learning with him. Particularly, Pearl has. I mean, it's an interesting one because I'll be honest with you. When I first watched this episode, I couldn't decide if it was that Pearl was just this extraordinarily dedicated soldier, extraordinarily so. Like she was with Rose, and like everything Rose said and did was just the word of God, basically. Because there are the war situations can get like that. People follow their leaders very very succinctly. They're very they treat them like deities. What their word is law, sort of thing. And I couldn't decide if it was that. Or something slightly more romantic, because it does seem oddly emotional. I don't know if you did you get that from this as well? Because I found that it was my first thought when watching this episode originally.
Yeah, no, I absolutely picked up a romantic vibe, but I think it's partly because Pearl has been shown to be cautious and worried about things in the past and wanting order, but not, destructive order, and so this sudden idea of her loving war and being like we won at the beginning when she jumps up, and Garnet Amethyst is Garnet is like, we went through all this and it was awful and there was destruction. She's like, but we won. That seems out of character. And then you feel like it was a way to draw her closer to Rose.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because obviously we still don't 100% know what happened, but I mean, is it fair to say that at this point it seems pretty clear that the gems are on Earth, as in the species, the gems? There was some sort of disagreement because there was whatever they were doing was a threat to Earth and the humans on it. That's become clear at this point, I feel. And
yeah, she says I'm going to fight for this planet. She says that, and she says if we win, we can never go home, and if we lose, we will die. So 100%. Yeah, so that to me is very clear.
Yeah, perfect. So I just didn't want to say anything that wasn't really there, but so it's clear that Rose led some sort of rebellion, and it's led to the freedom that the gems have now. You know, because they're for whatever reason. Well, as Pearl says in this episode, they won. They're on Earth, they're alive, they're fine, and there's clearly been a huge amount of destruction at some point. In fact, at the beginning of the episode, the mission they're on is actually just cleaning up the gem weapons so they don't fall into the human hands, I guess. There's a great gag about a giant axe as well, which I'm not going to go into, but dear Lord, that's so funny. The audio gag of them trying to get it through the door, but you can't see what's happening, and then later on you see that it's still wedged between the door is great.
I didn't actually interpret it that way. I interpreted it as, shit, we might be under attack. We better find all the weapons we can. There are some weapons.
Oh, okay.
Because they've had 5,000 years to clear it up.
That is a fair point. Because she sort of hints that that's what they're doing is clearing up. But you're right. Maybe that's just what they're telling Stephen. Because as we know at this point, they're still keeping Stephen in the dark. We learnt that in Winter Forecast because through one of the possible futures, we see that they're up to stuff to try and protect Earth that they're not involving Stephen in. That one of the possibilities, he discovers that, but you've got to assume that's still played out when without him interrupting them. So yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, where do you think you land there? Because it could easily be interpreted as a romantic relationship, but it could also very easily be interpreted as just somebody sort of deifying like a normal person. You know, like the way people rally around like leaders. There's been a serious amount of that through history. It could easily be either. But where do you feel now, based on what you've just witnessed?
I really read it as romantic, but I don't know. I'm not sure the show would go there because it sort of makes you look differently at Greg and Rose because it's like, oh, but he in that situation completely took her away from Pearl and crushed Pearl in that way. So I think I assume, I read it in this episode romantically, but I assume it's more a deep love and a deep friendship love and her following her friend into battle.
If it was more romantic though, would that not lead to better drama later on? Because if you think about it in a weird way, isn't it crazy?
Oh God, yeah, and absolute props to the show. That it would surprise me. Just because you then go, well, that must surely affect hers and Stephen's relationship to some degree. Mm-hmm. He is a product of a relationship that she didn't. She was jealous
in that situation. Yeah, in that situation, you're absolutely right. If it does play out that way, that would create a really weird dynamic there. So you at this point you feel like they probably won't go there for that reason.
Yeah, and it's more about that reason than them not going there from any kind of it's a kids show, because I think this kids I think that doesn't matter in today's society at all.
But also the show has shown that it's not scared of going to emotional places anyway.
That's what I was going to say. And two, the show has proven its boldness in that sense. So.
Well, so you think that they would stay away from that just on a more there's potentially the drama is almost.
It would surprise me because of what it would potentially mean for her opinion of Greg, her opinion of Stephen, and her opinion of that situation. Yeah. It would make me like, oh, they went there. More than it's
more about how it affects
possibility.
It's more about how it affects the character dynamics than anything else.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not. In this show now, what it's done so far, the depth of the story it is telling, it wouldn't surprise me, as much as it would make me like, oh,
yeah, that makes sense. So I mean, the flag was a cool bit of continuity. Obviously, there's lots of continuity in this episode because we visited that gem battlefield before. I'm assuming you remembered that.
No, when did we visit it?
I think it was the episode when they found that big triangle thing and then went inside. There was a bunch of mazes and stuff, and Stephen was like, kept trying to be serious Stephen and getting himself in trouble, and Garnet saved him a bunch of times. And it was that it was upside down. It was that the rooms kept rotating, which is why they couldn't get out.
Vaguely remember that.
Yeah. Well, it's the first time. It's the first time that we talked about the gems having a huge history on Earth, because when they first get there, Rose is like, "This is a battlefield. It's like 5,000 years old," or she doesn't quite say how old it is, but it's clearly very old. So it's the first time that we talked about like that the gems have clearly been around for a lot longer than like humans. And you were like, "Oh, it's interesting." So that was a very early episode, very very early. So the battlefield we visited before, and obviously the armory we visited before. That one obviously a bit more memorable, I guess, for some reason. So yeah, there's lots
I remembered both, that the sword and the world were in Lion and the armory.
There's an interesting debate, I think, amongst fans at this point, and I won't clarify just for the sake of not trying to I don't want to lead you anyway, whether this has been sort of settled or not. But at the point of this episode, from what I can tell, it seems that a lot of people were sort of debating the weapons, because the weapons there seems to be there's the weapons that the gems can sort of draw, but they seem to be made more out of like light, like part of the gem, because they can make multiple versions of it. Like we've seen Amethyst sort of summon 2 whips before, so that sort of thing. And I think we might have seen Pearl draw 2 of her weapons as well, the sort of staffs with a bladed end. So the question is, these weapons that are left behind, are they from a gem, or are these just actual forged weapons? For example, Rose's sword, is that a part of Rose the way that the shield is, or is it that she had the shield as her sort of summonable weapon, but then she had a sword made to match it? Does that make sense?
That would be that's where I would lean, that they had their gem weapons, but they are aided and helped by real physical weapons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my leaning as well, because I think if the sword was part of Rose the same way the shield was, then it wouldn't be left around. It would be in Stephen the way the shield is, and he'd be able to summon it at will, rather than it be an object separate from Stephen.
Yeah, that he reaches into line to get. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. That's how I felt about it too.
Yeah. But I thought it was good. Did you enjoy the episode then? You haven't sort of said whether you enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, this is a great episode. This is a fan favorite. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not that like crazy about it, that it's like an episode. Whenever people talked about episodes they were excited for you to get to, this came up a lot and it surprised me.
But I think that's because it's connected to Rose. I get the feeling anything connected to Rose is probably a fan favorite.
Yeah, that could very well be it, and we get to see her talking and again in this episode, and Stephen gets to sort of see her not on a flat TV screen, but actually see like a projection of her talking, and it's really there's an argument for that being quite a sweet moment. Obviously, there's a huge amount of like sweetness in it. I mean, there's one of my favorite moments in this whole episode is when Stephen and Pearl are riding on Lion, and she just looks down at him, and you just know, because there's a lot in this episode that's the part of the reason that she's upset is because she's seeing so much of Rose in Stephen. So much of Rose.
And she says, "You even sound like her sometimes." I've just realised, actually, I've been banging on for weeks, like, I think this show could easily do an episode where there's not necessarily a villain or not much gem stuff. And admittedly, there's the portals, the different worlds, the battlefields. There's a lot of gem stuff. But fundamentally, Pearl and Stephen's chat is not interrupted by a big evil gem monster fungus growing thing. There's no bad guy. There's no villain of the week.
There's no gem-based plot. I mean, the plot is basically just a sort of a character thing about how Rose feels. About how Pearl feels about Rose.
That's the same with the Little Butler episode as well. I didn't compliment that for that either. But yeah, that's 2 plots where there's gem stuff, but there's not, it's not as straightforward as there's gem stuff in the background of defeating this villain.
Yeah, and you were talking earlier about the sort of argument she has with everyone before she storms off. And you said you were going to get to that later. So, to top off my thing, by the way, overall, I do really like this episode, but I don't get as excited about it as some fans do. Some fans have a real personal connection to this and find this extremely emotional. I agree that it is a heightened episode emotionally, and I love what we learn about Pearl. I think it all really fits with her, and we really do see a growth, and we learn a lot about her character in this, and I think it's a really important episode. Blah blah blah. But it just doesn't. It's not one of the key episodes I think of when I think of this show, and I don't know if that's just because I think there are more important Pearl moments coming up than this.
Yeah, I think I think that's fair, and I think that's a fair opinion to have. I don't know the moments, but that's fair. The arguments. I just think she was a bit of a dick, but she is felt to be more of a dick because you don't see the moment that she goes back and apologizes to them. You don't see that, and I think she was aggressive enough to them, especially given what we know about Amethyst, that we should have seen that. And the other reason to see that is Steven says, "I'm going to go after her," and Garnet says, "Good luck." To actually see that he got through and achieved that would be quite nice, but she's got foresight, so she's probably seen it already. She also she's a bit of a dick to Steven, because doesn't she say how would you know? You never even met your mum, which is harsh as hell. That is a really harsh moment. She's a real dick in it, but that's in a way quite cool. I've said dick move quite a lot on this podcast in recent weeks, and
justified here. I felt
and justified when I said it before about Amethyst. But maybe it's quite cool that this show is not afraid to have its characters do some dick moves.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Sorry, by the way, for listeners, if you can hear my cat meowing in the corner. He doesn't like having a door separating him from me, and that's what's happened here. Usually I put him out when we do this, so he's outside and doesn't realise that I've closed doors in the house, but he's in the house and therefore just meowing constantly at the door. He's been doing it for about 5, maybe 10 minutes now, and I don't want to open the door because I think Nadia's in the house. I don't want sort of extra sound to travel through, but by closing the door I've created extra sound because the cat's just sat on the other side of it, scratching at it and meowing. So sorry for extra noises, folks.
Fair enough. That's fine. I think we're done anyway, aren't we?
Yeah, about that. But I just thought I'd tag on an apology at the end if anyone noticed that or could hear that. I don't know. I don't know how audible that's going to end up being, but if you could hear it because you've got super crazy good headphones and it's super loud, I'm sorry, not intentional.
That's fair.
No. So that's everything for this week. We'll give you guys a break from awkward endings this week. Just
maybe the awkward ending could just be the sound of your cat angry.
I wonder if I could just capture the sound of him meowing at me on the microphone.
You could open the door.
If I open the door, he won't meow.
It's quite cruel.
He's in if I open the door. He won't be meowing then. If I go towards the door... No, it's not going to pick it up, I don't think.
I love the way that you've apologised for it, and now you're like, it's not going to pick it up.
Well, just get one cat meow. He can meow us out. Also, I've forgotten the title. Of next week's episode, so I'm quickly checking.
Well, while you look, just do the goodbye, and then I'll make a meowing noise,
and we'll pretend it's the cat. Yeah, it'll be the same.
That will ultimately be awkward.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you're right. Okay, and there I was saying we give people a break from them this week, but there you go. Yeah. Okay. 1 second. Just get the. So yeah, that's been everything for this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you next week as we discuss Open Book.